Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's webinar. My name is AJ Kuftik. I'm a digital product strategist with Expedient. I want to thank you for joining me this week. Today, we're going to be talking to Joe Daly from Nationwide Insurance about how to transform your financial operations as part of your cloud transformation. Real quick housekeeping note, please enter questions about here in the Q&A panel. That helps us keep track of the questions, make sure they get answered. If you ask a question, you're entered to win a prize. That prize this week is a $100 Amazon gift card. You can also, if you need to step away, you want to go back, you want to tell your boss about how you're going to transform the financial operations using the Finops model. This is all being recorded, so you'll get a link to the recording in your email. You will also, you can also go to our website, go.expedient.com/webinar replays, youtube.com/expedient, instagram.com/_expedient, and linkedin.com/company/expedient. Please go ahead and give us a follow and like on all of those. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Joe Daly. Joe, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. How are you, AJ?
Doing great. So Joe, kind of introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do at Nationwide.
Sure. So at Nationwide, I am the Director of Cloud Optimization Services. I've been doing that for about 3 years now. What our team does is we enable the Finops platform culture practice at Nationwide. Before that, I spent a few years doing the same thing at Cardinal Health. So I've been doing this cloud optimization, Finops, cloud financial management, whatever you want to call it. I've been doing it for about 5 years now, and it is the itch I like to scratch. It's, we don't all choose our passions, but this one I get a lot of energy behind. So
how do you even get into that? Like, where do you start with financial operations? Because it's not like I didn't see that on the course list when I was in college. So how do you even get into that?
It is a carefully curated career. I started off as a tax accountant, did that for many years, where I got used to lots of cryptic rules that influence how expense is calculated. From there, took the next step to IT accounting. So you learn IT area in general has tons of capitalized expenditures, far more than most areas of business. So I got to interact and learn a lot of the differences between capitalized expense and regular operational expense, and work with the IT side of things, trying to explain to them, no, I can't reclass your capital budget to your expense budget. It doesn't work like that.
Not how money works.
Yeah, exactly. And then they would accuse me of not thinking outside the box. I'm like, no, it's the law I'm trying to think through. And spent some years in portfolio or IT portfolio, learning how IT business cases were created, and how they get chosen for funding for business. And I really enjoyed that quite a lot. Then this is the secret, became operations manager of VMware. Can't explain that jump from finance to the VMware, managing the VMware environment at a Fortune 100 company.
It's a jump.
It is a jump, and maybe I didn't nail the landing, but that's okay. I learned a tremendous amount of work that goes into maintaining infrastructure environments, and engineers who willfully and willingly, stay up to all hours of the night just to patch a server, and get that experience of how operations work in an IT environment. ITIL, which I totally respect ITIL for the stability of operations, but the finance guy in me screams like, oh my gosh, this is so inefficient. How many people are on this call right now just to get a plan to patch a server? So all that happens, and at the time, I was I don't know, I was the right place, right time, wrong place, wrong time. Developed the cloud migration business case for Cardinal, and worked on that for about a year, trying to figure out the best way to approach it. Learn how can you get value out of migrating to a cloud environment. And from there, I discovered cloud financial management, because you're shifting from a capital expense model where you're capitalizing your expenses, and it's fixed through depreciation, to a variable expense model where you're paying for what you use. And that just blew up for me. I loved it.
Does your finance background and understanding tax accounting and how expenses are driven, does that how does that play into today's IT
Mhm.
because of that shift, right? You have a very different viewpoint on IT from people like me who came up in the I built stuff and then I fixed stuff.
Yeah. So, and that's really funny is when I introduced myself at Nationwide, I was like, hey, this is what we're going to start doing. We're going to start being financially accountable for what we're deploying. Someone raised their hand and they were like, why do we got to care about costs? And I couldn't understand, like, are you setting me up? Are you giving me like an alley oop here? Like, yeah, slam dunk, we're going to care about costs. We're going to win. It's like, no, they grew up and or things like the costs are fixed. We just deliver the solution that's being asked by our customers. Like, no, no, no. This is this is today where we have to work with the business and with finance to drive value. We can't just keep uh, we need to provide the business and finance more levers to pull in order to manage their environment to be able to respond to the customer need.
And I think that plays back into that whole concept of managing a VMware environment. I buy a host.
Mm-hmm.
That host has an amount of resources. I'm probably not going to use all of it on day one. So then we get into this like IT project funding sort of juggle where like this poor schmo over here just bought this host for the resources that they needed for this project.
Mm-hmm.
But then this project over here doesn't need all of those resources. It can fit onto that box. Ta-da, VMs are free. So I think is part of the change in going from that model to a cloud-based model, is that why people struggle with that financial change so much?
Yeah, and exactly. And it's really hard, like from the business side, like on the on-prem model, it's like, wait, they just bought the pool, but I get to swim in it for free. And and or like the flip side is like usually it's the people who are swimming for free never complain. It's the people who bought the pool are the ones like, I just funded all these projects that don't support my department that I'm supporting.
Right. I still got to change the pool filter. I still got
Yeah,
to do all the maintenance. This stinks. But they
right.
get to swim in it. What the heck?
Yeah. And so you got two abstraction layers there. You have the virtualization abstraction layer, which is creating all that efficiency in your resources, right? It's really kind of hard to see which business is directly benefiting from that dollar that you bought for the host. And then from the finance side, you have accrual accounting, which is taking that cash outlay and dividing it over 3 or 5 years or whatever your accounting policy is.
Right.
So when you're trying to match up depreciation expense with who's using that resource, that VM resource right then, you just stop because it's really hard to do that. Whereas in the cloud model, you have a resource, by the way, which are deployed depending on what your model is. They can be deployed by any application team who can launch a pipeline, write code, a script, or just go and click, depending on what your model is. So instead of having a centralized team that's deploying all this infrastructure, you may have hundreds of app teams, like all launching all launching resources, all of which are charged by the hour, maybe by the second, right? So all these little widgets start spinning and accumulating expense charges, but you can track every single one of them to who launched it and why they were launching it.
And so I actually had this conversation yesterday and I found this immensely fun. I was talking with somebody who's an enterprise architect and he said, it's weird. I've gotten worse at Visio and way better at Excel. And it's like, because you're not designing things anymore. I don't have to design each, lever. I don't have to design each server. I have my teams coming in. The spending is a far more important part of this than just the base design. Like here's the design, off you go. And everybody's fine with it. But then we have to figure out all the costs. We have to figure out all of the little levers to pull to make sure that we're not spending millions of dollars wildly unnecessarily.
Right.
And so that sort of transition from Visio to Excel is a big deal. I think as we start to go forward, you talked a little bit about Finops. So can you kind of discuss kind of what Finops is and why an organization would need that?
Yeah, so basically it's a practice to drive financial accountability in your cloud environment. And, you know, I, everyone immediately assumes, and understandably so, because it's usually the first step, is that FinOps is all about driving your expense down as low as it can go, running it on bare bones. Uh, but that's not necessarily what you want to do. Some apps, yes, absolutely, they just need to perform the function, and if the function takes a long time or not impactful to our customer. However, the revenue generating apps, oh, you want those to purr. You want that to pump in as much cash into your business, so that you can keep doing good things. So you may not want to run that on bare bones. You may want to may want to prioritize performance over cost. Um, uh,
Basically, the juice is worth the squeeze.
yes,
Right?
absolutely.
I'm going to pay a little bit more, but it's going to do something for me.
And FinOps allows you to track that, like, hey, if this is how much it costs for this application to generate $1 of revenue, perhaps we want to increase that cost to generate more revenue if there's a direct correlation there. Or, you know what, that is the cost of $1 of revenue for that application. And yes, it's worth it. Meanwhile, flip side, if it's maybe like a data analytics reporting tool where it's like, hey, we run this report every Friday morning at 8 a.m. so that the CEO can read it uh, with her cup of coffee. And it's just like, well, to get that report, we're going to have to run a large resource so it's ready in time. But maybe if you can have it by 10 a.m. instead of 8 a.m., you could save a little bit of money, and that's worth it. So you can start having those conversations of like, here's the you could work with the business and their finance team to be like, what's more important, speed, quality, or cost? And then figure that all out.
It's the good, fast, cheap. You only get two,
Yeah,
right?
can't get
But
all three.
in trying to balance this out, how do you actually take some of these actions, right? How do you actually look at that? Because it's right, it's the model is, I think the interesting part is that it's called FinOps.
Yeah.
Because we've talked a lot, including on these very webinars, about DevOps and how you got to change your development model to take advantage of the cloud. FinOps is the same thing, but with finances, right?
Yeah.
You have to change your financial model to take advantage of the cloud. And
It's
so that's the big thing. And it's very interesting to me as somebody who's a very technical person to actually sit back and think about, what is that business impact? What do my costs change? How do they change? And then how do I make sure that I don't get my hand smacked because I use too much,
Mhm.
right?
Well, there's 3 steps in the FinOps process. Basically, it's inform, optimize, and operate, then repeat. So the most important part is being informed. Make sure your environment's organized, make sure you have a good tagging policy that you can easily identify what that resource is and what it's supporting. Because then once you're informed and you can see it, then you can manage it. You could say like, oh, this is a really large server and it's not really being utilized fully. We can easily shrink this down, or maybe we can't. I don't know. You could start having those conversations, but you can't have those conversations if you can't see it. So organization, being informed, super important. That's like the number one thing to do. After that, everything starts to flow a lot easier.
And when you have those sorts of optimization conversations, how do they go? Because you're kind of walking in and telling somebody, hey, this might be too big. This might
Right.
not be big enough. Like, how do you have that conversation?
Well, it's always fun because none of this is just anecdotal. It's all data driven. It's not like, hey, I've seen a server like this before. They're, usually not well utilized. It's like, no, here is the data. This is your server. This is all your tags that we are able to identify it with. By the way, we can actually see the username of the person who launched it, so we know it's yours. And here's the data metrics, here's the CPU metrics, here's the memory utilization metrics, here's the input output, and here's the hourly rate of that resource. So then you could graph it, you could put in Excel. Some folks like a pivot table. Well, no one in IT, but finance folks love pivot tables. If you
Love
put
a
in a
good
pivot
pivot
table,
table. Well,
they'll buy you a coffee. But they, seeing it, the data is believing it. So then they're like, well, you this is what is always so surprising is I always like to give the options of, well, let's just try reducing the size of it. And after, like, a moment of thinking and processing, they're like, no, just just turn it off and destroy it. We'll launch it when we need it again, which is the best answer possible. Because
Right, because then you're not spending any money.
yeah,
And
like
I think that's the interesting part, because you have that option now. You didn't have that option before.
yeah,
In an on-prem world, you don't have the option to shut it off and then not pay money. You bought that host. That host is there. The resources are there. That ship has sailed.
yep.
So with this new model, you have the ability to shut things down and literally cut the meter right there.
Yeah.
So when you're having these discussions, how do you like really have, like, how often does that happen?
Well, I've made every day for the last 5 years. Like, it depends on how big your cloud environment is. I mean, we have monthly reporting where so that one, we charge back everyone. This is a good step. Some companies do show back. We do charge back. It's very important in order to drive accountability that you show people their costs. And I personally like putting their costs with their budget so that they have some skin in the game of managing it. And once they are financially accountable, then they really love talking to you about it. And
it's surprisingly open when they go, okay, this dollar amount is in my budget and it's not enough. How do I do with this?
yeah, exactly. And there's so much data in cloud spend. There is so much data that you could use to get ideas to back up like arguments for I need more budget because look. But like, so we get lots of questions like, hey, I need help understanding this charge. I need, what are my options here? I'm going to blow my budget. What are my options? And there's always something to do. There's always an option. That's the beauty of it. It's no longer like, hey, we're stuck with this expense for the next 3 years. There are always options in the cloud.
So when you're having these sorts of discussions, like what are the sort of actions you can do? Because you mentioned how you can like tag it back. And we always talk about things like account sprawl, right?
Mm-hmm.
This team went out to the cloud and they've got their own account. This team went out to the cloud, they got their own account. It's really hard to see all of that spending together, right? How do you handle this in an organization as large as Nationwide? Do you have a few accounts? Do you have a lot of accounts? How does that work?
At Nationwide, we have a lot of accounts. I've been and I've seen places that have fewer accounts, and fewer accounts can work, but what's so important is that you have an organizational structure that matches your business.
Okay.
We have accounts for each department, and in those accounts you can have, there's a prod, test, dev, basically the 3 main accounts for each department. And what's beautiful is not because someone is probably thinking, Joe, what about the stuff you can't tag? It's great, but not everything is taggable, and that's true. However, if you have an organized structure where you're like, this is your yard, and anything in your yard you are accountable for, that makes tagging a lot easier. Say, hey, here's your server cost, but here's some like CloudWatch metrics or monitoring metrics that just, cryptic expense rules get generated and applied at the account level. We know who is funding that. It's that department. So we're able to put all those those things there. I got lost in my analogy, AJ. I love
no,
my
I mean,
voice,
it's that sort of thing of I
Mhm.
have all of these accounts now, right? And because I have all these accounts, I can get really granular with who's doing what and where. And this can help sort of drive that data even further down, because you're right. If you only have a couple of accounts and
It's hard.
I go spin up some things and there's like 4 total accounts, I now have the risk that this organization isn't necessary, that my organization is spending a lot more than it should, but no one knows that because they only see my account. They don't see it coming back to my business unit. I didn't tag it properly. So somebody has to go do all the detective work to go figure out who spun up this instance, why was this instance spun up, versus it was spun up with the test account for my business unit. And I can go, okay, this is probably some sort of test system for AJ's business unit. Now you can go yell at AJ as to why he did this, but you know real fast where it went to, and you know where the budgeting is. And how does that play into how budgeting and sort of account, or not accounting, but how does it play into like budgets and approvals when it's done that way?
Well, it takes a lot to grow. That first year is hard when you're transitioning. It's just like you go in with forgiveness with finance. Finance has to be along your side the entire time, and normally they are because they start to understand this. Like, oh wait, it's financial accountability in a variable model. Yes, we're there. Um, but like the more data you have, like okay, when it's really organized and it's really clean, it's really easy to start making like, okay, we know we're going to grow through these actions. So we'll be able to make some assumptions uh, and give this much budget. And then you can continue to iterate as you get better. It's not, there's no more like, well, budget's set, expenses are set, let's run, we'll talk next year. It's a monthly, if not weekly, discussion with all involved to be able to be like, here, the data is continuing to flow and we're able to continue to iterate to make the best decisions.
And I think that that plays in actually to the question we have here. How does
Mhm.
Expedient help with regulatory and compliance issues that come with FinOps in the cloud? And that's where our tooling comes in, right? We have our own cost control product that can do this, right? We can do the sort of thing that Joe's talking about where you can have all of those accounts. All of those accounts can all be inside of our platform, and then we can surface up the total spend inside of the platform. So I think this actually plays really well of, hey, how do I deal with having 1 million accounts? Have a tool that can see all 1 million accounts. And I think that actually drives everything forward, right? So you can have that inside of, maybe if you're only using one cloud, it's easy to do inside of that. Like I'll pick on AWS. AWS has an entire organization structure that's inside of it. But most of our customers and most of the people that we surveyed are using more than one. So we're able to take all of those accounts that you're using in AWS and Azure, and we can even link those back to tags and groups inside of the platform to help you along that way. Because we know the same thing happens, right? We've seen it from, Joe's seen it in a large organization, but I imagine that even small organizations could benefit from that too.
Mhm.
So another question here, big change to the way that things have always been done is kind of part of the cloud transition. So how long did this cultural transition on finances take to get buy-in from the rest of the org?
That's such a good point. I've been doing this for 5 years, and there's some area, and I if I had the science, I would sell it. Um, it it's really so much culture based, right? Our folks, everywhere I've gone, other companies I've talked to, it is like, hey, this is the way we've done it. And in fact, I have a training this afternoon, and the first way I break the ice in this training is going to be like, you want to know why I want you to change your process, and why can't we just do it the way we've been doing it? And so it's just building that story. It's not just, I think people get so frustrated with cloud transformations when they're like, cloud, it's the new thing, it's the best, it's whatever. And it's just like, yeah, and it could also be a giant disaster if you don't have buy-in and accountability. So it's just like, look, this is why we're looking at it. This is all the differences. You have to have that context of, yeah, it was a fixed capitalized cost, and now you're getting charged by the hour. Do you want your kids? Do you want your kids leaving the lights on in every room? Do you want the refrigerator door open? Do you park your car and leave it running just so it's ready if you ever need it? Like these are
You
the
just
new
went
types of
after you
models.
just went after all dads. Do you leave the lights on?
No,
Why?
before this, my kids were making chocolate chip cookies, and I just ran down, and the oven was still on. I scolded them quickly, and took a cookie, and came up here to do this.
Well, I'm glad that you had a warm cookie. I had a
Yeah,
ham
it's
sandwich.
delicious.
So one last question here.
Hmm.
Uh, how does someone get started with FinOps, right? This is, again, a completely new world for most IT and most technical people. So how do they get started?
Step one, go to your Expedient Instagram account, replay this like 2 or 3 times, give it likes on YouTube. Then you go like, hey, I'm ready for step two. And step two is go visit finops.org. There is a FinOps Foundation. We started in 2019. It was just 30 of us when we started. We are up to over 1,500 members now globally. This is a
Hey,
practitioner-based community. It's part of the Linux Foundation practitioner-based community. It is free for practitioners. If you are trying to figure out how to do this, great resource to come join. There's a Slack channel where with all sorts of rooms, all sorts of different vendors and clouds focus rooms where you can go in, say, hey, has anyone seen this or anyone done that? And there are great resources being created. There's cost optimization on Kubernetes. There are white papers on how to handle shared costs and just the entire framework that's being developed that is free in wanting your participation. So definitely check that out. That is finops.org.
I mean, this has been fantastic. And I think one of the best parts about this is that we normally don't talk about financials. We always like to talk about the technology because that's the fun part, right? So for us being able to do this and have, some of your time, obviously, to kind of talk through the financial side of this, the business side of this, I think can also help make these sort of cloud journeys and cloud transformations better and easier than they have been in the past. Joe, if anybody wants to reach you, how can they reach you?
Go to LinkedIn. You can follow me because I am amazingly egotistical and I put a lot of stuff out there. Follow me, reach out to me, message me there. That's why.
We appreciate everybody for joining us today. We do have a prize to give away. The prize, I closed the window. The prize for this week goes to Chris Taskey. Congratulations to Chris Taskey. Karen will be reaching out to you shortly. Next week, we're doing another run of our cost control demo. So if you're interested in the financial operations, join us next week. We'll be showing you our tool to be able to do that. I hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Please stay safe, enjoy a hot dog or a hamburger, and we will see you next week. Thanks.